Good to go. We good to go? Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for attending the public hearing this evening. Please be aware if you're attending this meeting, our meetings are recorded for future viewing, and we are privileged to gather on the traditional territory of the Kwakwaka'wakw. So I'll call the meeting to order. This public hearing is being held in accordance with Division 3 of the Local Government Act, requiring public input on planning and land use bylaws. Kevin Brooks, our consultant planner from McElhenney Limited, will give an introductory presentation on the proposed zoning bylaw 705/2021. Staff will read out written submissions. The public will then be given an opportunity to speak and are required to give their full name and residential address prior to being allowed to speak. Each speaker will be limited to 5 minutes in length. Please keep in mind that the information submitted during this public consultation will form part of the public record. Finally, 3 calls to the public will be issued asking if anyone else wishes to speak prior to the closing the meeting. And as a reminder, the town will not, and council will not receive any more public input regarding the proposed bylaw once the public hearing process is closed. So I will turn the meeting over to our planner, Kevin Brooks, and who's going to fill us in on the changes that you see before you as a public this evening. So thank you for joining us, Kevin, and welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Wexstrom. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I'm going to share my screen. I have a brief presentation. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I have a brief presentation this evening. I'll go over the part of the presentation I gave at the first public hearing just to give a summary of sort of how we got to where we're at now. Brief summary of what we heard at that public hearing and at the open house and through conversation with the public after the last public hearing. I'll go over the proposed revisions from the bylaw that was presented at public hearing number 1, so people are aware of the changes that have been made, and then we'll be open for any questions that may have. So as I had mentioned before, the approach to the zoning bylaw was not a full rewrite. The focus really was to update the bylaw, to modernize it, to deal with unlawful clauses, and again, to discuss consistency with the official community plan as we are doing the project and review at the same time. Some of the key topics we're really we're looking at for the zoning bylaw specifically was the ease of interpretation and administration of the bylaw itself. The current bylaw is very complex. As I'd mentioned, the removal of unlawful clauses. There's been significant legislative change both in the Local Government Act, Building Code, and things of that nature since the bylaw was adopted, that which we needed to remove those unlawful clauses. Reconciling the uses and review of the definition, which I've touched base on previously. When we look at some of the general stuff that we've done, we reorganized the sections again just to flow a little bit better. We renumbered the sections and we reformatted the overall bylaw just for consistency and ease of use. One of the largest things that we did in the actual text part of the bylaw was really review the definitions and the uses. There's 82 uses listed in the original bylaw, but only 48 definitions, with many of those definitions having regulations embedded in them, which makes it very difficult for interpretation. We added 45 definitions. Again, this was really just to make it a little bit easier to interpret, so so there's a basis on which to determine how uses are permitted within the community. As part of the review, we amended the general provisions of the zoning bylaw itself. What we did is took all the landscaping and some embedded provisions that were in the zones and moved them into the general provisions section. We had proposed the permission for backyard hens within the community. We reviewed and revised the bed and breakfast provisions, touched a little bit on height with regards to the M1 zone, because we revised the height based on comments we had received during the process. Storage and residential zones, and I just added diagrams throughout just for ease of interpretation. We took all of that information and we provided the bylaw, and we had a public hearing back in June. And we had heard pretty clearly some concerns that came out of that initial bylaw. Council decided, based on that, to go back and reconsult with the community to have a little bit fuller discussion in regards to some of the key comments we heard. Some of the comments we heard and we discussed through the open house was the concern for permission and management of chickens within the community was very clear, and we'd heard a lot of comments about that. There was concern raised for the Legion itself as a permitted use in the CS1 zone, and we had spoken to many people that are Legion members throughout the process in regards to that. We spoke to a property owner on Mine Road in regards to concern for the loss of the C2 zone and how that might impact their residential use and the legal conformance of their property. And we had lots of discussions with property owners in the downtown, which is probably one of the biggest moves that we are proposing, was rezoning the M1 zone in the downtown to this to C2. And we heard very clearly that the majority of property owners affected did not support those changes. What we have proposed to do based on the feedback we received during the open house and through conversations with the community was to remove the chicken section at this time, to revisit backyard hens, potentially through a different approach for regulation in the future, if the community so decides that's the case that they want. A requirement for electrical fencing for beehives was added because this was a recommendation that came through the conservation officers in the area. We provided some clarification a little bit around carriage houses, as a question came up during the actual open house and through conversation with the community, and we provided an update to the definition to clarify that. We added apartment as a use to the M1 zone. We added a site-specific provision for the Legion in the CS1 zone to allow to regularize the use of the Legion specifically, to provide clarity. And revise the campground definition. There is just a couple clauses in the campground definition that meant it was only for temporary operation, and that is not the intended case for that. So we just updated that definition. So that's the proposed revisions to the text amendments, but a lot of what we had heard were proposed map revisions based on the previous proposal, and we had many comments in regards to that. So the largest conversation we had really was the downtown commercial and industrial area. The downtown, based on the comments we heard, that people were not happy with the revised. And so as you can see on the left hand, that was what was presented to the public hearing on June 13th. What the direction is being proposed now is to revert to the existing zoning with some minor amendments in the area. So those minor amendments would be that in Area A, that area would be rezoned from C2 to C1. And in Area B, that area would be rezoned from C1 and A2 to C2 zone. The rest of the area would be remained as it is zoned currently. So that means the industrial lands that are currently there, the purple M1 area, would stay as M1, and that the existing C1 area would stay as C1. We also had comments in regards to industrial properties. I had mentioned the property on Mine Road. Presented at the public hearing, it was going to be rezoned to M1 for consistency with the surrounding zoning, and we're going to maintain that property under the existing zoning regime at this time as a proposal. We'd also heard from a property owner out on Mine Road that they have existing heavy industrial uses, so we're proposing to reflect the existing uses through the zoning and revise that to an M2 zone. Last but not least, we heard very, very clearly through the conversations at the open house and from comments that the parcel adjacent to the hospital was being proposed for residential, and we'd heard clearly that the community would like that to stay as the A1 zone at this time. With that, that provides a conclusion to the summary. I'm happy to answer any questions that people or council may have on me.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin. I will ask staff if there are any written submissions that need to be read out.
For your chair, no written submissions this evening.
Okay, great. All right, at this time then, I will ask for first call for speakers. A reminder that if you would like to come and speak, either to make a comment or ask a question of Kevin, please come to the mic up here and then state your name and your address, please. So this is the first call for speakers. I know that there were some questions before our meeting began, so now's the time to get them answered. Yes, yeah. If you want to come up to the front here, and then that way Kevin will be able to see you on camera, or just barely see you on camera. Thank you.
Church on Mine Road, 2501.
Just one moment. Sorry, is that, it's not on? Just one moment, because Kevin can't hear you if it isn't on. So just 1 second. Thank you. And if I could get you to state your name and your address.
And
please.
Landy, I guess I'm representing the Baptist Church again. We keep getting people with concerns about the changes, and then the last property on Mine Road there has stayed the same. And people are concerned. I know we've been told that we will stay the same and churches can be the same throughout. But we were wondering, one person was wondering, would the taxes go up? I know we're a charitable organization and we have tax exemption, but they're concerned also about, one, the taxes if something changes. Also, if the 75% of the building or structure goes down, will we be able to rebuild as a church? And my question is, why start at the road there at the works yard and then stop at the, it looks like the former Jehovah's Witness churches? So those three questions, I guess. Why have we changed?
So I'll refer to Kevin then, if you can answer those questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the questions. So the change that we made was, instead of trying to list churches in numerous zones around the community, because it was a listed use in numerous zones, what we did is we made the revision to allow for churches and places of worship to occur anywhere in the community, no matter what the zone. So that's the first one. And that kind of answers the second question, this idea of the 75% question. So because a church is permitted anywhere in the community, if there was damage to the church for some reason, and that, yes, you could rebuild as of right anywhere within the community. So if your existing structure was damaged, yes, you could rebuild. So that rule doesn't apply. It would not be deemed a non-conforming structure because it would be explicitly permitted anywhere in the community. As for the last question, I just need a little bit of clarification of what exactly you're meaning by why did you extend it? I don't fully understand the question.
Well, it seems to have driven a line from Tower Street right down to the former, well, it almost looks like the Legion's involved. I'm sorry, I really can't see. So why the changes to there? Like all those, you've got the Latter-day Saints, the Legion, the Jehovah's Witness Church, and the Baptist Church. And at one time, it was all they were all put there for, I guess, convenience. But people are asking why change that now? Leave us the way we were. And one person actually says, "Can we get it in writing that we are in perpetuity? Can we get someone to say yes, or a clear guide bylaw statement that says we are, we will stay the same?"
Thank you for that clarity. So the reason for the proposed zoning changes along the Mine Road area, and that is just for consistency of use because of the area is predominantly a light industrial area. The A1 zone, or sorry, the A2 zone that some of those properties used to be, was basically a relic zone, which is a small land holding zone where there's very few properties in the community, and it really didn't allow for the proposed uses either. And so the goal was to clean up the bylaw in a manner that's easier to administer in the long run. So that was the reasoning behind it. As for the official letter of statement that the church can occur in perpetuity and permitted under the bylaw, that is something we can do because it's very explicit in the zoning bylaw that places of worship are permitted within any zone.
What was the changes to the Legion? There was some, like I see in the
Thank you. So the changes to the Legion is the Legion property is being proposed to be a commercial service 1 zone. And we've, based on conversation with many people, we provided a site-specific amendment to the C1 zone to explicitly allow the Legion to occur there in perpetuity. So that means that if, again, the Legion burned down or something like that, they'd be able to rebuild as of right, and they could continue to occur on that site in perpetuity.
I just still don't see why you just drew a line. It just didn't make sense to a number of members why the line was drawn there. And there's still a lot of concerns why we've been changed. I don't see any representative from the Mormon church, but I know there's some concerns too. So I think we just like to be the same or stay the same. And again, so there are some concerns for the church. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Was there any further questions for Kevin?
Somewhat answered, yes.
Okay.
Somewhat.
So seeing nobody up at the mic, I will ask for a second call. Are there any speakers that would like to speak to the changes or the zoning bylaw, proposed zoning bylaw, or have any questions for Kevin Brooks? And I'll just double check. Is there anyone online? Not this evening. And I'll ask for a third and final time, or is there anyone that was wishing to speak or has any questions for Kevin? Okay, I'll now declare that the public hearing is closed. And as a reminder, the town and town council will not receive any more public input regarding the proposed bylaw now that the hearing process is closed. A motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded. All in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you very much for coming out this evening. Thank you for your input prior to. We appreciate it. And have a lovely evening.